Hey gang. Hello, hello. Let me hear that again. Okay, I think we're all right. Hey, welcome. This is Friday. This is Friday. Let's keep track what day it is. Friday, December 4th. 3 weeks from now is Christmas here in America. And where most of you come from, it is too. One more hit of coffee before I get started. So if you missed me yesterday, you'll notice that I finally busted through the 1,000 broadcast daily. I've done more than 1,000 broadcasts. 1,000 daily art adventures. Yahoo! Right, enough of that. Oh no, let's get official. So there it is, daily art adventure number 1001. Continuing small wedding watercolor, etc. Let's move you guys so you can see what I'm working on. There we go. So, real quick introduction for those who missed yesterday. This is the painting so far. Here's the photograph, edited slightly in Photoshop, elongated the figures as always. And then I talked about this yesterday quite a bit, so I won't repeat it here, but I went straight to mechanical tricks to render this couple. I did not spend any time, as I normally do, I didn't spend any time trying to draw it. I went straight to quote unquote cheating, sorry. And the technical trick that I used was I put this on my light table and very carefully with a Sharpie marker traced this photo onto this paper. And then from here, I traced this onto my watercolor paper with pencil, with nice, sharp, fine point mechanical pencil. All right. So I didn't spend any time, as I prefer to do, but on a job this small budget, small size, small time frame, I just went right straight ahead to, forgive me, cheating. Okay, I just went straight ahead. Now, and I started actually painting details in the face, and I realized, no, you guys, some of you would enjoy or benefit perhaps from seeing this. All right, so I also talked about this yesterday. This is my portrait watercolor kit. And if you want to know what all these colors are, I have already posted a still photo of this on my YouTube community page. Okay, so those of you watching with iPads, I don't know what it is about iPads, but they don't show community pages. The distinctive feature, what's the difference between this and my ordinary? Well, one is, I forgot to say this, I have more flesh tones. I have more earth tones here than my normal palette. More reds, browns, and yellows than my normal. But the main thing is, none of these colors are staining colors, so they can all be lifted without too much trouble. If you're a watercolor painter, you know what I mean by that. If you're not a watercolor painter, sorry, just look it up. What does it mean to lift watercolor paints? All right. Now, I want to see if I can get you guys close enough. You're going to be looking at me at a bit of an angle, because I need to get my head in here. As much as I want you to be able to see what I'm doing, I want to see what I'm doing even more than that. All right, so I'm going to go straight to some of the dark features here on the girl, Logan, is her name. I'm using, as you can see here, a very fine, in both senses of the word, a very fine Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. And don't tell anybody I said this, but I'm also wearing 2 pairs of glasses at the same time. I'm just so glad none of my adult children are here. My grandchildren all love me and think anything I do is cool, whereas my children would go, "Dad, you look so weird." Anyway, all you grandparents know what I'm talking about. So I'm wearing, they're not quite strong enough to tell you the truth. For this kind of detail, I could honestly almost use a jeweler's loop, which I have around here somewhere. That kind of tool, a jeweler's magnifying glass, is left over from my extreme airbrush days. And in those days with the airbrush, the extreme magnification was used basically so that I could see the edge of the frisket and pick it up. Frisket is a clear, like giant Scotch tape sort of, so that I could see the edge of the frisket and pick it up with my razor blade. That's what I was wearing. And so that I could get the frisket placed back down in the exact correct spot. And forgive me, I know some of you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. Sorry about that. Frisket, look it up, F-R-I-S-K-I-T. Classic old airbrush technology. I am quite sure that a lot of what I'm doing right now, I'm going to come back and smudge it up one way or the other later on, because as you know, one of the characteristics of watercolor paints is they're capable of absolutely razor sharp edges, like I just put down there right now. So that's part of the reason that watercolor has always been a favorite for the hyper-realism crowd. I have something to say, something good to say, not criticizing the hyper-realism crowd. And again, I will say this, I've said it before, everybody should do at least one. If you're an artist, you should do at least one hyper-realistic, either watercolor or oil painting, doesn't matter. Whatever it is, you should do one. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that for now. At least one. But if you are, especially if you're what I call an early journey painter, you're fairly early in your art journey, that means, and you want to go into realism. By that I mean now hyper-realism, photorealism, extreme realism, whatever you want to call it. Especially for some reason I feel this way about watercolor. If you're going to go that route, depending where you live, you must go all the way. I'm not going to tell you the name, but I will say there is a very no, not very, a fairly well-known North Carolina, which is where I live, a fairly well-known North Carolina artist. Has a lot of prints and coffee table books, and he does lovely, not Bob, I'm not talking about Bob Timberlake here, who does oil paintings, by the way. I'm talking about a watercolor painter. And he does what I would call nearly, almost super realistic watercolors. And in my opinion, getting really close to hyperrealism and dropping the ball 2 inches from the finish line is very unsatisfactory. So, and I feel like that's this person whose name, of course, I'm not going to name. I'm just telling you this story because every time I look at his work, I kind of go, ah. I'm not upset, so to speak, at the person. I feel bad. It's like, oh, come on. No. Don't do that. You know, like you'll have everything just right, except for the gravel in the driveway, so to speak. He'll do just like a speckling or a spattering or something like that. It's just scratching. He'll let for the grass. He won't finish every blade of grass. He'll leave some of the grass. And again, of course, I'm not all that hep about hyperrealism, but I just feel like if you're going to do it, for some reason I feel this way, especially about watercolor. If you're going to do it, go all the way, man. Don't stop. Don't drop the ball 2 inches from the goal line. Having said that, let me tell you about my good friend who does it the right way. And in fact, if you want to be, if anybody listening by any chance wants to be or wants to do their one hyperrealistic artwork in watercolor, then by all means look up David Stickle, S-T-I-C-K-E-L, I think. L-E? I think it's E-L. David Stickle. Okay? He really is a dear friend of mine, in spite of the fact that I just realized I'm not positive about how to spell his name, and I'm pretty sure. David Stickle. Just look him up. She's pretty close already. After she dries, I'll do a little bit of probably picking, scratching with an X-Acto knife. And if I'm still broadcasting at that time, of course, I'll let you watch that process. All right, David Stickle. Look him up. And I just have one more thing to say about that. I've mentioned this often. Again, if you're an early journey, that's my name for beginner. I don't want to call you beginner, but if you're an early journey painter, one of the best things you can do for your art journey is find some artist whose work you like and chase them, copy them, chase them for a while. Not for the rest of your life, not for the rest of your career, but just for a while. And I have 2 artists that I did that with. One from 40 years ago when I was an illustrator, and another from 3 years ago when I was just getting into oil painting. So the illustrator was Maxfield Parrish. Okay, my point is this. Now, let me back up. If you want to get good, do not chase or follow somebody who's pretty good. Chase or follow or emulate, be influenced by the very, very, very best you can find. I find among students, I'll say it this time, I'm thinking now college students, age students, I find this sometimes, I think, here's the way an early journey painter can tend to think. they want to paint, let's say, in watercolor, and so they'll, especially now with the internet where you can find anybody, you know, they'll pick somebody who's pretty good because they're slightly intimidated or maybe greatly intimidated by the artists who are outrageously good. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying don't do that. Do not chase people that are pretty good. Don't pursue somebody. You look at their work and go, yeah, you know, I think I could do that. I'm sure there's some wisdom in that, but what I'm saying is, pick the best in the world and pursue them. You're going to have to work harder, of course, but in the long run, that's a better idea. Don't pick somebody that's pretty good. Pick somebody that's really good. So, I'm back to my friend, David Stickle. Anybody that's interested in being what I'm calling a hyper-realist, I have a recommendation for you. Chase David Stickle, okay? Just a little while ago I mentioned airbrush, and that's easy. Oh, and so I didn't finish. The 4 or 5 people I've chased, so to speak, in my career, 2 of them as illustrators, that was Maxfield Parrish. If you won't remember, some of you won't remember his name, but if you look him up, look him up, you'll go, oh yeah, oh, I've seen his stuff. He was kind of like the Norman Rockwell, one generation earlier, and a little bit more. He was trained in Italy, so he's a little bit more continental in his style. Wonderful fantasy-ish, which I was totally into when I was a young illustrator. Then when I started oil painting, again, 20-some years ago, I chased William Bouguereau. Now, really, in his case, all I did was one copy, one painting. I took a class, it was called Renaissance Painting, and the instructor was a follower of Frank Avino. And it was not just copying a painting by William Bouguereau, it was also copying or emulating. I started a word and then switched words midstream. Copying and emulating. If you combine, you end up with copulating. That's not where I was planning to go with that word. I promise, I was not copulating William Bouguereau. Oh, forgive me, sorry. This has gone gross really fast. Anyway, I was emulating William Bouguereau. And I actually only did one painting, one copy. You can see that on my website too. But it was a doozy. I think I probably spent 200 hours on that painting. And I learned a ton. Just learned a ton. By the way, here, I am not at all happy with these pencil lines. Like, what was I thinking? I shouldn't have done that line right there. There is a crease in her arm that I'm looking at, but I'm going to have to do something to get rid of that pencil. I'll probably I'll try to erase it, but I think I probably am unable to erase that line. So I'll probably, again, very possibly, literally with a magnifying glass this time, I will take an X-Acto knife and scratch out that line. Just point, tick, 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 tick. Maybe I don't know if you want to watch me do that or not. Where else? Oh, I mentioned airbrush a little while ago. So again, another person whose work I wouldn't say emulated, but I was influenced by, and I mentioned him periodically. Oh, hey, you guys are chatting up a storm. I'll get to you in a minute. Is Drew Blair, D-R-U, Drew Blair. And as I always whenever I mention him. The reason I copied him is because I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina 31 years ago. Had never heard of him. Moved here and discovered, much to my amazement, that the best airbrush artist in the world, Drew Blair, lived here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, again, I know airbrush is kind of an old-fashioned technology, but there are still crazy people like Drew who do it. He teaches. Anyway, he moved away about 12 years ago. But you can look him up, Drew, D-R-U-B-L-A-I-R, Drew Blair airbrush. And if you look at him, you go, golly, he is the best in the world. As I usually say, there's probably some guy in Japan and some guy in Russia and some guy in Brazil that all might claim to be the best in the world, but if they do, it's because they're comparing themselves to Drew Blair. They don't exactly compare themselves to each other. They all compare themselves to Drew Blair. So I knew him when he was in his probably early 30s. So that would mean he's now in his early 60s, like me. He's a little bit younger than me, younger than I. Okay, her teeth are, of course, too white. Let's try to fix that. I'm having a hard time reaching my rinse water because you guys are between me and it. There we go. Let's look for watercolor, just a very pale flesh tone. Basically the same color as her skin, just a lighter version of it. I think this painting is too small to try to suggest individual teeth, so I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm looking and thinking. So anyway, I was influenced, of course, by Drew Blair. One more story along these lines. The story, the subject being, if you're going to copy somebody, copy whoever you think is the best. So I actually had a very specific experience of this. Mid-90s, probably. I was a full-time illustrator, and I got a job to do cutaway airbrush. That means sort of like X-ray vision of airbrush. The first job I did was for a beverage delivery truck, sort of like a Coca-Cola truck. And so the assignment was to do airbrush cutaway view. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. I think if you Google just cutaway view, like cutaway view of a boat or something like that, or cutaway view of a truck or car, you'll see it's. Now all of this, I imagine 99% of this will all be done in Photoshop. That's how I would do it now in Photoshop. I wouldn't do airbrush at all, unless I was doing it just to make a point. But I had never done, mind you, this is typical of my airbrush career, I had never done an airbrush cutaway ever in my life. Never taken a class, never watched anybody do it. But of course, when the opportunity came to do an cutaway airbrush illustration, I said, sure, I could do that. So the point I'm going to make is this is back in the day before the internet. Okay, so this is like 1990 or before any kind of mature internet. We certainly did not have Google Images. Okay, but in those days we had illustration annuals. That is, every year a number of different publishers would publish, quote unquote, the best illustrators and the best illustrations in the year. Of course, you paid to get in, so it wasn't like wasn't a competition. It was just you paid your couple $1,000s and got in. So a couple $1,000 was quite a bit of money back then. So pretty much only professionals did it. Anyway, so I had several of these books around my studio. Big, thick, like 1.5 to 2-inch thick books, large, full size, filled with all kinds of jaw-dropping illustration. I miss those days, I really do. Maybe they're still publishing those, I don't know, I haven't looked in years. Anyway, there were a number of cutaway airbrush artists, X-ray view airbrush artists in the annual. And I looked at all of them, and I just picked out the one that I thought was best. Yep, they're all good. Yep, they're all good. This guy's the best. And I remember, for some reason, he lived in Arizona. I'm pretty sure it was Phoenix. And they had his phone number there. So I just called him up. Just called up a fellow artist in Arizona. Said, hi, my name's Dan Nelson. You know, I'm about to do my first cutaway. I probably said, you're the best. I like your stuff the best. Probably said, probably complimented him honestly. And said, you mind sharing with me how you do that? And it was a very, you can tell that by my story, that it was a very happy experience. He was so nice. He told me everything. He gave me all the, I was already a professional airbrush artist, so he didn't need to tell me. He just gave me the inside scoop for this particular kind of airbrush. Anyway, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. If you're early journey artist and you have to do something, pick the person who's the very, 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 very best that you can find. Best in your opinion. Doesn't matter whether they're really the best, just whoever you like the best, that's good enough. Anyway, hey, you guys are chatting up a storm. Hey, David, one of my old regulars, is asking me their first chat today if I figured out the new channel, and the answer is no. So David, yesterday, which you missed, I announced, and drum roll please, and I do this with great sobriety, I guess. I've done quite a bit of work at the new channel, and it just was not working. It was just getting more and more frustrating. So David, I've decided I'm going to broadcast on this same channel. I'm going to make it real obvious by the titles so that nobody has to listen to anything spiritual if they don't want to. I'm going to make it real clear if this, any broadcast is either spiritual content or artistic content. But I've decided to, and I already know, I feel bad. I'm going to make some people upset. That does make me sad. Not sad enough to not do it though. I've still decided to do it, and I'm assuming I will lose some subscribers. That's too bad. Not because I'm worried about losing numbers, just because I don't like to lose friends. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do, David. I'm even toying with the idea. I'm not sure I'm going to go with this. I'm even toying with the idea of calling it Daily God Adventures. Just be kind of, I don't know if that's too cutesy. That remains to be seen. But I've decided, I'm going to just throw caution to the wind and let my true self emerge, and let you guys deal with it. Again, I do feel bad about possibly losing some friends, but my guess is actually there'll be more people who will join on than will drop out, but be that as it may. So that's what I've decided to do, David. Good question. I talked about it quite a bit yesterday. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, the Canadian government. I'm sure the Canadian government tried to cancel Christmas. It's exactly. We have a similar thing, and I don't want to get into politics. I'll just say that our governor in North Carolina is a lot like the current PM of Canada, kind of cut from the same cloth, and he's tried to cancel Thanksgiving. And oh boy, I won't get into it. I'm not going to take that bait. on my new broadcast. See, this is an art broadcast, so I'm not going to get into politics or religion. Okay, hang on. I know I got off picture there for a while. Hello, Richard. Nice to hear from you. And Valkyrie, Michael. Michael's already calling me Pastor Dan. And maybe her chin is something. Yeah, very possible. I think mostly, David, I just need to soften those lines in her chin, don't I? Well, let's do a little bit more on him and his tuxedo, and then bring it up closer to fulfillment. And then I'll do more on the background. So I am, on this particular painting, I'm doing what I would call a legit style watercolor painting. I doubt that I'm going to do any opaque medium. That would sure make the lace on the dress would certainly be a lot easier to do. So I may change my mind, I don't know. But anyway, for the most part, I am planning to do this as again, what I call a legit style watercolor painting. Unlike what I normally do, which is a watercolor sketch, where I use colored pencils and I use opaque medium quite a bit. Because this is so small, because it's a wedding painting, because I'm being paid for it, blah, 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 etc., etc., etc. For all those reasons, I am doing a formal, might be another word, a formal watercolor, not what I more often do, which is a watercolor sketch. The primary difference being the use of opaque mediums. Hello, Sharon again. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for saying hi. Now, let's do some background. Get you guys up high enough so. Whoops. I've got a brush here that might need cleaning. By the way, if it does need cleaning, my favorite is Goop hand cleaner. Followed by a brush cleaning product. I guess it's all right. All right. So I want to push the background quite a bit darker, and just a little bit of detail in it, like a floor or horizon line, if you will, a floor line. That's about all I'm going to do. Oh, and I forgot I was going to do some of the lighting, sconces, chandeliers. I will have to I will lift those out then in a little while. But I'm going to want this background, part of it at least, to be nearly black, but a warm black, brown black. So I've got ways to go. Oh, I forgot to mention when I was reviewing what I had done yesterday, you could see it. I forgot these are going to be rose petals that are falling from the ceiling. people threw them up in the air. And I masked all of those. So I used a mask product. There's all kinds of them out there. This one happens to be Grumbacher Mask It Liquid Frisket, and it's tinted. It's got a little bit of orange in it so that it's easier to see, because most Frisket is white or clear, and so it's a little easier to miss it on the paper. Of course, once you brush any dark watercolor over it like this, it's not hard to see at all. So, looks like I'm using mostly right now Liquitex Sepia Umber is the name they chose. The Liquitex people chose to put on this, the color I'm using the most right now. It looks black on my palette, but my palette is white, so that would explain why it looks black, but it's actually dark brown, obviously, by the name Sepia Raw Umber. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if they means they put both pigments in it, both sepia and raw umber. That's my guess. That's my guess, is they combined the two. My observation is that some paint companies like mixing their pigments and creating their own colors, and other paint companies pride themselves in the purity, if you will, the classical purity of their colors. So they don't, it's just, you know, raw umber or sepia, but never the two of them together. So evidently the Liquitex company also, and I don't know if this is a hard and fast rule, but the paint companies that market more toward beginner painters tend to make crazy custom colors. And once you've been painting for a while, in my experience, those crazy custom colors are a little irritating, because after a while, as an artist, you begin to understand what color raw umber is, and you begin to understand what color sepia is. Or, I don't mean sepia, I mean sienna, burnt sienna. And so when a company kind of combines the two and makes up something, you know, midnight brown or whatever they call it, you go, oh man, cut with the poetry, you know, just tell me what's in it. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, I don't have a tube of paint right here. All good paint on the back side, well, since I'm talking about it, I really should show you. I'm just grabbing one here. Oil paint. Some of you may not realize this. This is Richardson Oils. Oh, and it's called Leaf Green, which is the very kind of thing I'm talking about. That's a meaningless term. Richardson makes very good oils, but over here on the back, it should have, yeah, pigment, or in this case, pigments. This label's coming off, so if you can read this, almost, not quite. All right, let me, wow. Okay, pigments, PY65, that means pigment yellow, number 65, and pigment black, 11. PBK, well, I'm not sure what K means, PBK 11. So, thanks to Google, if you want to know what PY65 is, just Google. I'm sorry, I'm out of focus. Just Google PY65. They also have another number, which I don't know what it means, and I could Google that to see what it means. What does 11740 mean? And then PBK 11, and you'll find real quickly what pigments those are. So anyway, I don't know if you're a beginner, you might not be aware that all reputable painting companies include the pigment number, not a description, but a literal number on the back of the tube. Watercolor, same thing. All right, we are getting closer to the value, the depth of color that I want in the background. I don't want this hard edge here, though. I want a soft edge. And all it is that suggesting the edge of a floor. And even that, I don't want that extremely well defined. Here's a word of caution. When you use a Frisket, again, I'm referring now to this Frisket, brush-on Frisket product, a masking product, don't use a hairdryer, because the heat, ask me how I learned this, because the heat can set or harden the mask. Oh man, this happened to me one time in particular. It happened more than once, but one time I was doing a full sheet watercolor wedding painting. And this is back in the day, several years ago, when I used to always finish every wedding painting by the end of the reception. And I used a whole bunch of Frisket, brush-on Frisket on the painting. And then, of course, because I'm in a great big hurry, I had a hairdryer there, and I dried the whole thing on high heat. Oh my goodness! It was I managed, but oh my goodness, the paper held up. Thank God it was 300-pound, good tough paper, and I did manage to get it all off, but oh my goodness, literally got a workout. My arms were sore. I was rubbing so hard for so long to get all the Frisket off, because it had petrified. It had become hardened under the heat of the hairdryer. So there you go. There's a good warning. Don't do what I did. Whew. I'm mixing up again. Darker blue, black blue, bluish black, to his suit. Yes, one of you said you looked up David Stickle. Yeah, pretty impressive stuff. He's won all kinds of national, international awards, all kinds. He's been in Splash, which is, again, some publisher somewhere said, hey, let's publish the best watercolor paintings done, I think in America, not sure, or was it international, this year. And he's been in it, I don't know, 6, 7 times he's been featured in that. Won something in Moscow not too long ago. Wins thing in maybe Italy. Anyway, and he's one of these, he's not like me. Y'all would like him, but he doesn't broadcast. He's a nice guy. I'm being facetious. I'm a little bit more spiky. I'm more likely to irritate people. He's one of those guys that is so nice he would never irritate anybody. My impression. I hate him. He's so nice, I can't stand him. Oh, and by the way, I've told this story before. But we were in a gallery together for many years, and we were great friends. So of course, I would cut up, and I would point at his paintings and say, yeah, I used to paint like that, because there's a grain of truth. Again, if you want to see my realism stuff, you just go to Dan Nelson Art, and especially in the illustration section or automotive painting, there's some pretty realistic stuff there as well. Like I said, I think everybody should do at least one, and I do at least about one every 2 years. I do a hyper realistic or extreme realism, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so there's a grain of truth. I would say I used to paint like that. I would point at Dave Stickles stuff. I say I used to paint like that. Then I took pills and got over it. It's only mildly funny. It's not hilarious. It's only mildly funny because there's a grain of truth there. All except for the pills part. I didn't really take pills, but to paint that way, you have to be pretty OCD. Dave doesn't seem OCD to me, but except when he's got a brush in his hand. And it's, oh my goodness, Mr. Obsessive Compulsive, without the disorder, I'm sure. Anyway, so I had said this several times, at gallery openings and so on, just cutting up, having a good time. One time, then he responded. He pointed at my wall of paintings, and he said, "Yeah, well, I used to paint like that. Of course, I was in 6th grade." Well, at least now you know what I think is funny. Oh, that was so funny. I cracked up. I said, "David, don't ever stop saying that. It is hilarious." He pointed at mine, said, "Of course, I used to paint like that. Of course, I was in 6th grade." Again, only funny because there's a grain of truth in it, right? He probably did paint like that in 6th grade. Oh. I just realized I completely overlooked the groom's hand when I was doing flesh tones up here. This painting is certainly not hyper realistic, not anything close to it. In fact, I'm sort of debating, even as we speak, how punctilious, how close, how fastidious to become. And generally, I don't want to become too fussy. I'd rather keep it. But there is a line right down the middle of her forehead that I think is a bit much. Let's see if I can zoom in here and let you see that. Yeah. All right. I have a number of tricks. Here's one. This is a sharpened brush handle. So just a piece of wood. Get it? Coming to a sharp point. If I'm not sure it's sharp enough, I'll stick it back in a pencil sharpener. Give it a little extra turn. Okay, I'm going to paint with a piece of wood, a damp piece of wood. Ta-da! Get it? Now let me look at it while I'm softening edges. And this, this business of softening edges in watercolor is kind of a, By doing this, I'm moving away from fresh, spontaneous, loose, watercolor-ish painting, and I'm moving toward a more fastidious, fussy, photographic realism. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does, right? And my favorite kind of watercolor paintings are not the ones where the artist has blended the edges. My favorite kind of watercolor painting are the ones where the artist lets the watercolor be watercolor. Probably my favorite watercolorist in the world is Alvaro. I'll say it like an American first. Alvaro Castanet. He's from Uruguay. And again, I'm saying all this like an American, okay? My guess is it's Alvaro Castanet. I don't know if it's, it's got a, if the T is pronounced, it's, I don't know. I should find out. Alvaro Castanet. Anyways, if I say it that way, you can. Anyway, he's my favorite, probably, of all the watercolor painters I can think of. And he would not do. He is a very spontaneous, loose, classic watercolor painter. All right, same brush in my hand, by the way. So I use this one brush. This is my watercolor kit. As you can see, it's an old, well-used oil painting bristle brush. And the bristles, now this particular painting is pretty small for this large of a, but I'm going to try. Okay, so I want to create a highlight on her forearm. So what I'm doing now, and all you watercolors know this, but this is called lifting, or lifting out the paint. And very classic, traditional oil painting watercolor technique, re-wetting the paint, and then with a tissue, lifting it. But the bristle brush is particularly good. Let me see, I may have another, let me look, I may have another smaller bristle brush over here. This is sort of one of my travel kits. Oh, I do, but it's not much small. Oh, look, I did the same thing twice. I didn't realize that. Wood at one end and bristle at the other. This one actually comes to a sharper point though, so I'm going to continue to use it. All right, I definitely want to do the same thing on the groom behind under his hair here. This is coming off, this paint is coming off, is lifting really easily, which means I need to be careful not to do too much. I may need to leave here shortly, so let me jump ahead to another technique. I mentioned it a while ago, and that is X-Acto knife. Again, this is everything I'm doing in this painting, at least so far, is classic, traditional oil paint, watercolor painting technique. Okay, this is not, I'm not doing anything weird. This is all, they did the same thing back in the 40s or whatever. So it's an X-Acto, brand new blade. Just put it in. Let's get the paint all the way here, and I'm gonna turn you sideways. Sorry about that. And I'm going to very carefully scratch this pencil line. All right, I didn't do much. I'll come back in a minute before let me show you another classic watercolor technique. Traditional watercolor technique. This is an eraser pencil, okay? And I'm going to see if any of that pencil will come out with, most of the time after you put watercolor on top of graphite, the graphite won't come out, or won't come out very well. But you can always try. Same thing. Let's go down here to, hang on, sorry. Let's get the groom's hand. Let me, there's too much pencil there. I bore down too hard when I was drawing. I should have done it with a lighter hand. Yeah, so some of it's coming out, so that's good. Same thing around his... Now what I'm doing here is traditional, but it's not... what's the word? It's sort of frowned upon. Like if an expert watercolorist were to watch me doing this right now, they'd say, yeah, do that if you have to. But next time, don't draw so hard. And mistake, I just made a mistake. I got carried away and bore down too hard with the lead pencil. That's much better though, having lifted up that. Now, I talked about this crease in her arm. I shouldn't have drawn this line at all. But let's see if it'll come out. Oh yeah, it's coming out a little bit. Okay, I don't mind very faint. Let's go back to X-Acto knife, because somehow between the tracing and the painting of this man's forehead, I lost his brow, his forehead right above his eyebrows. So now I'm using classic traditional drawing skills. That is, I'm looking at the photograph and just copying. My point being that even when you do employ photomechanical tricks to capture an image, it doesn't even, it never gets you all the way around to home base. Now follow up with an eraser. An eraser can also, in and of itself, can lift out. Let's do a little experiment over here. Let's see if I want to do a one of the sconces from the chandelier up here. I just want you to see. So what can an eraser do? So you see there, it's typical as a traditional pink eraser, and I bored down, pretty hard, quite a bit of pressure, and rubbed it for several 30-40 seconds maybe, and was able to create that much lightness. Now it's not a pleasant, since I've done that, let me go ahead and finish. It leaves a not a terribly pleasant texture. So I'm trying to mix up a warm yellow over here. Here we go. So I want to go over that with a warm yellow to achieve. So anyway, that is just, I wanted to show you that. I will do more of that. I'll do some more vigorous lifting to create the. See, here's some of the chandeliers in the photograph behind the couple. Another trick while I'm at it, of course, scratching with an X-Acto knife roughs up the paper a good bit, and sometimes that roughness can be seen with the naked eye, and it's not a pleasant feeling. It looks like, man, I don't know, it just looks scratchy. So here's a good trick. This is an old, cheap stainless steel. Do not use silver. Do not use silver. Stainless steel spoon, and I'm going to use it to re-burnish the paper here. The paper, yeah, and I'm also, turns out I'm also burnishing the watercolor. So I'll probably want to come back. So I'm just taking the fibers of the paper that I've roughed up and just mashing them back down. And as I said, having done so, I also raised up a, no, not raised up. I also made a shiny spot in the watercolor, and I'm thinking if I come back and re-wet that I can fix that. I believe that's correct. So anyway, I have a spoon always in all of my watercolor kits. Have a cheap, do not use silver. Silver is a drawing tool. I wear that, you can actually draw with silver. So you would not want to be drawing with a spoon while you're doing that lifting up. Now let's go back to this man's hand, do some of the details. This, of course, is a flash photograph, and which means it's somewhat less than ideal for painting, for copying, because there are no, the shadows in the photograph are not traditional. That is to say, normally in most of life, if you're outdoors, the sky's light, light is coming from the sky. So the top of an object outdoors is light, the bottom is dark, right? Same thing typically in indoors, because there's either lights in the ceiling or the lamps shine off a light or white ceiling and so on. So even indoors, most of the time, light is coming from above. And so that there's a predictable shadow pattern. The light is above and the shadow is beneath. The problem with flash photography, the light is coming straight on, which means all of the rounded figures, like her arm is the easiest place to see this. It's dark at the top and dark at the bottom, and light, the side that is facing. And I've made the mistake in the past of trying to imitate, try to invent the color or shadows, and it has not been a happy experience. So there's a little mistake right here on her arm, where I painted her hair, and the dark paint came down across this line, and that's unpleasant. So let's lift. I'm lifting now just with a high quality sable brush, because it's so fine. Same thing down here. Little hair of my brush with dark paint on it came up into the fleshy shadow part of her arm. Unpleasant, so let's fix that. Let me go back to the pencil eraser pencil, and take out, again, I just drew my mistake. I know better, just mindlessly drew, pushing down too hard. So there's too much graphite. But happy to say that the eraser is taking care. I don't mind if there's just a hint of graphite down there. But I don't want as much as I've got. Oh, here's a tool. A big fuzzy brush. In fact, it's called a dusting brush. It's actually made for artwork. How about that? All right, tell you what, before we go, I'll end the broadcast here. I have a little bit of touch-up to do here, but you can see where I'm going. I'm going to pick up the frisket, and I just happen to have in my drawers right here a gnarly-looking little ball, rubbery ball of, it's actually a ball of liquid mask. You can pick it up with your fingers. The downside is, by rubbing the paper, this hard, I'm concerned that I would be getting oil from my fingers into the paper, and I certainly do not want that. Plus, this ball picks it up just a little quicker. They actually make in art supply, in the art supply world, they actually make frisket pickup tools, a little rectangular, kind of like an eraser, kind of like a gel eraser. This is exactly what it's made for. It's for picking up dried mask. And in case you missed earlier, these are pink rose petals. See all those rose petals here at the bottom of her dress and on the floor? These are rose petals falling through the air. Now, I mentioned this earlier, that the downside of using a mask, it works really well. And I have these bright. I'm going to paint them pink, so it won't be as pink. But they're still very hard-edged. And generally speaking, the hardness of the edge is not pleasant. So, do you know how I'm going to fix that? Already showed you once. Let's do it again. At least one way to fix it is with my wooden pencil, wooden point brush. See that? Just come in here and with it damp, just smudge. You can do this with a brush, of course, but I just find it strangely easier to do with this little bit of wood. And if I ever get, if it gets a point on it I don't like, I just stick it back in a pencil sharpener. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, I think I'll end here. Thank you so much for your company. Let me see, pick you up and turn you around the other way again. See what you guys have been saying while I've been working. David asks, what's the dark area behind it? She actually has hair going all the way down to her butt. So I'll make that look like hair. It's amazing, long hair. Woo. Hello, Radina. Radina, you guys don't get the news from Ottawa, for about 3 weeks. That's funny. That was really true 100 years ago, was it? Paper. I'm using not expensive paper. It came off a pad, 140 pound, not 300 pound. I don't remember what brand. Strathmore, probably. Oh yeah, the pigment code tells you exactly which pigment is used, and you have to Google it to find out. Hey, Uncle. Good to hear from you. Yeah, doesn't Santa Claus living? Hey, wait a minute. To get to the United States, he has to go through Canada to get here. Uncle, no, this is not for a future oil painting. This is just a wedding watercolor painting. That's what it looks like so far, and I'm happy. The hardest part is done. Her face, or very close to finished, very close to finished, and I'll be fiddling with the rest of it. I have yet to decide whether to use white gouache to emulate, to render the lace on her dress. It would be so easy. I'm going to start out scratching, see how I like it. If it ends up being prohibitively difficult, then I might go to gouache. My client, this is really only worrying about my fellow artists, aren't I? The non-artists won't hardly even know what we're talking about. What do you mean gouache? Anyway, all right. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Once again, if I do a theology teaching, I'll mark the title very clearly, so that people won't get confused. Hope you have a great rest of the day, Friday, and if I don't